Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Specter, President and General Director of Arizona Opera, and welcome to another episode of UnMic'd, the show where we find how the world of opera connects to just about everything else. And we have a really special episode today. This is the first time we've had an episode with two couples instead of individuals, and they're both involved in the arts. One couple heavily involved in opera, one involved in the worlds of theater and film, and all of whom I'm really happy to have with us today. So first, from the world of opera, I'm really pleased to introduce Stephen Costello, an internationally renowned tenor, currently performing at the Metropolitan Opera and other places, and Yoon Kwon Costello, a wonderful violinist, a member of the not the Arizona Opera Orchestra, although we could look into that, the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, also an accomplished chamber musician. And then from the world of musicals and film, we have Bobby Lopez and Kristen A Lopez, a wonderful couple who have had a huge impact in pop culture and in theater, probably maybe best known through their work on co-collaborating on the writing of Frozen. As a father of two daughters, I have personal thanks for many Let It Go's performed with hula hoops in the backyard of my home in Austin and then in Arizona. So thank you so much for being here today, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. It's such an honor.
Hey, no, it's my honor, really. So let's just start out with how you all met, because I think there's obviously workplace romances, no matter what your field is. But when it comes to the arts, sometimes those romances are a little bit more visible, and they sometimes have unique kindling because of the unique work environments that we meet in and the work that we create together. So let me start off with Bobby and Kristen. If you could share just how you met and what that journey has been like for you.
You want to go?
Sure.
You start.
Well, we met at a moment before either of us were really getting to work at our profession. We met in a workshop, which was a fancy word for a writing class called the BMI Layman Angle Musical Theater Writing Workshop, which is it's been around forever. Alan Menken came out of it, Ed Kleban from Chorus Line, Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty that did Ragtime, Michael John LaChiusa, lots of wonderful composers and lyricists have come through.
Janine Tesori, right?
Janine.
Who straddles into the land of opera.
She has, yes, with the opera Blue that's recently been come out and has received quite a bit of positive acclaim, yes.
Well, anyway, it's a great place, and I was in the third year, the advanced class, and Kristen was a first year student, so we weren't in the same class yet. And I guess it was the very first night that Jeff Marks and I had ever performed any songs from Avenue Q. Our first show that would eventually go to Off-Broadway and then to Broadway. Mm-hmm. And Kristen came up to me after we performed a couple of songs and was just so excited to talk to me. And I was just so excited that any female was excited to talk to me, since I was living in my parents' place and writing a puppet musical at the time.
Oh my gosh.
And just the fact that I had reached this one person meant that Avenue Q had done its job.
Amazing.
The song Fixer Upper from Frozen, actually, I used to talk about Bobby as a fixer-upper to my friends, because there would always be like, so wait, he lives with his parents and he's writing a puppet musical. I was like, okay.
Yeah, but his parents are awesome. And the puppet musical's going to win a Tony.
They're just roommates. So what year was that you guys met?
That was fall of 1999. And I should also say that I, like many females, had sort of been given the message growing up as someone who loved creating story and music, in my backyard, directing it, producing it, starring in it. But I had gotten the message that I had to be a performer because there were so few females doing the writing and doing the directing.
I see.
But at the year that I met Bobby, I had finally kind of seen the light and had this big epiphany that I was supposed to be a writer.
Amazing.
And that used all the parts of me in the best way, because I'm still able to sing and make music, but without the anxiety of begging for a job every time I want to do it. And also take my giant imagination and my natural proclivity for writing and trying to organize melody into words, which my father has as well. I think it's like an OCD thing, but I was in the middle of this heady time of discovering what I was truly supposed to do. And then there was this really cute guy who wrote these amazing songs and had this incredible twinkly sparkle in his eye. And I kind of fell in love very quickly with him and with this new chapter in my life.
Amazing. Yeah, and I remember that twinkly sparkle from when Bobby and I were resident assistants together at the Boston University Tanglewood Institute in 1996. Now, Bobby, if I remember right, at that time you were composing classical music. Am I remembering that right?
Well, I was in college. Yeah, I was in composition class, and I wanted to write string quartets and all that stuff, and didn't know if I maybe would one day want to write an opera. But the path that I ended up taking was more towards songwriting. I definitely realized that was my big strength, and certainly as I went down the road of collaborating on songs, things went further towards my affinity for pop and musical theater sensibilities.
So you had that same kind of epiphany as Kristen at some point where that light switch went on and said, this is the genre in which I can find my voice, where I have the most to contribute.
It was hard for me. It was a struggle to write long forms, and it always has been. That's something that I want to look at in the second half of my career. But yeah, the path of least resistance was to write songs.
I'm feeling like a sequel to Die Valkyrie coming up.
Oh, yeah.
In your future. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
You have no idea.
I might have an idea. So Stephen and Yoon, same question. Now, Bobby and Kristen met when their current careers were sort of in their nascent stage. Both of you had already reached a very high level of visibility and success when you met. Tell us a little bit about that.
Do you want to go? Our story's really not that interesting. I was.
Well, if you want the G-rated version or the no.
Well, yes, that's UnMic'd after dark.
No.
We want the adult version.
Let's give the PG-13 version, not quite Avenue Q version.
Give us Mozart in the Jungle.
Okay, Mozart in the Jungle.
We can sell the uncut version after this.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, we actually. Well, Yoon tells me we met a while before we actually started dating. We met at a restaurant after one of the shows. She came in with a conductor friend, and I was sitting there with some colleagues. And
he was on vocal rest.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Of course, he's a tenor.
Actually, we had kind of parallel lives. I think your debut at the Met was what year? 2007.
2007.
And I think that's the year I started as well. So we kind of started our Met careers together. And I always remembered him, of course, because I'm down in the pit looking at all the talented and, some cute singers. And I always remembered him. But the timing just never worked out. We never, we don't really get to meet one another very often. But after that party, how did we meet?
Yeah, after that party, I think I was doing The Merry Widow at the Met, which is the same season, but later in the spring. And I was in my apartment after rehearsal, and I think I got a message on Twitter from Yoon Kwon asking if I was in the cafeteria today. And of course, I looked at it, and I looked at the picture, and I said, absolutely, I was in the cafeteria. And I think we just kind of went out from there, and we hit it off, and we didn't really, even at that point, we were just kind of casually seeing each other.
Yeah, we were both not ready for anything serious at that point.
Yeah, because our schedules, my schedule is ridiculous. At that point, I wasn't living in New York. I wasn't living actually remotely close to New York. So I was flying back and forth. When I worked at the Met, I was maybe there for 2 months, and then I was gone for the rest of the year. And then it wasn't until I think 2017 where I was doing Romeo and Juliet at the Met. And after that, we really just started seeing each other formally, got together. And
3 months later.
Yeah, 3 months later
we got married.
Wow.
Well,
that was quick.
As an old friend of Stephen, I'm so grateful to see how happy you guys are together and how happy you make each other. So
yeah, but it's funny. We did have parallel lives. I mean, like for instance, I made my professional debut in a small beach city called Ocean City, New Jersey. New Jersey.
I remember that.
You made her professional debut also with that same orchestra.
Unbelievable.
Years before I did, but it was just the similarities are just are nuts.
There's kismet there. Yeah, I believe it. I have to go back for a second to mention the Metropolitan Opera cafe, or the cafeteria, for Bobby and Kristen's benefit and for everyone that's watching the show. It's the most magical place because it looks like, I don't know, Stephen, it kind of feels like a little bit like a room you might find in an old casino in Atlantic City. You know, it's got these muted sort of burgundy and brownish kind of tones.
It's like a bad 60s diner that never got updated.
It never got updated, Formica on the tables and so forth. And you walk through this place to an area that's, you know, very similar to, you know, your high school cafeteria with, you know, different stations and that kind of thing. But on the pathway through the cafeteria, you could see people who are stagehands, orchestra members, you know, Renee Fleming, the greatest opera singers in the world, and they're all just there having their, you know, their fried chicken and mashed potatoes or whatever it might be. And you know, I was lucky enough to work at the Met for 5 years and get to experience that cafeteria. I think it's just it's like the cantina in Star Wars in its own way. You know,
it really is. You know, although they stopped the grill, so you can't really get a lot of.
Stop the grill. Oh, forget it then. We've got to cut this part of the show.
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
there you go. Talk about. I mean, that was a space opera, right? Isn't that the way he described it? Well, okay. So we've covered how you met and sort of where you were in your lives when you met, and parallels in your artistic careers and so forth. You know, we've just gone through this incredibly challenging period of time in the arts, and you know, we've had to lean on each other, whether that's in our personal relationships or our organizations and the public and so forth. We've had to connect in all kinds of different ways and find support in each other in all kinds of different ways. Reflecting on your relationship, how has being a couple, you know, through the arc of your career been something that's been challenging, and also ways in which it's been not just creatively fruitful, but in ways that you've been able to find kind of emotional strength, because it is such a hard career no matter where we are in this ecosystem that we're all a part of. Why don't we start with Stephen and Yoon on this, and then we'll go to Bobby and Kristen.
You know, I think for me, it's been very beneficial in a way. I mean, because she plays all the shows that I'm in at the Met. She can work her schedule to the point, so every show I'm on, she can play in the orchestra. And for me, artistically, it's great to have that opinion of someone you trust that you know is not afraid to tell you the honest truth. So if I can come off after a rehearsal with the orchestra or a show, and I'll ask her, how was this or how was that? And she'll honestly tell me if she liked something, if she didn't like something, things I could do better, if I was out of tune here, if I wasn't focused enough here. And for me, it elevates your performance because you know that she's not saying it in a bad way, just in a way to make you a better performer in the next show. For the difficulties or the schedule. The schedule is, with her job, she does, I don't know, 100 and some performances at the Met. It's hard for her to get time off. I'm gone for 3 months at a time. Maybe I'm home for maybe 2 weeks before I have to leave again. So that poses a lot of challenges.
I mean, it was definitely a challenge, especially in the beginning, because, you know, I think that our first year that we were married, we were apart. He was gone like 8 months out of the year. So I was basically commuting. I think he was in Paris for most of the time, and I was commuting every 2 weeks or so, just so we can spend a few days together.
Amazing.
But I mean, we met when we were older. So I think it's kind of, in a way, nice that we get our alone time, though, because it gives us a chance to miss each other and to appreciate the time that we have. Because, you know, being married, we've only been married almost, 7 years now? 6 years?
6 years.
6 years. But I mean, it could be like 20 years like this, and then you kind of take each other for granted. And I think we're lucky in the way that not only we share music, our passions together, but we are able to like continue to have that freshness every time we come together. And sometimes we meet in another country. It's like a little honeymoon, a little trip. So that's nice. And for me, I've been able to appreciate my job more because I've been in this orchestra now for 16 seasons. So that's a long time.
Amazing.
And, it's also easy to like just see your perspective of things, like see just what's going on right next to you or in the pit. But to be able to like hear his stories and the struggles and challenges, like the singers and the production and everyone else, I mean, it's such a huge thing, opera. And to be able to just appreciate and be open to all of those elements have really made my job more rewarding, I guess.
I mean, and as much as like something like COVID was damaging to our business in those 2 years, it was the first time for us that we actually had a normal marriage, a normal relationship.
Amazing.
I was home, I was around the house, doing things around the house, making dinner together, fixing things. It was just that was the first time I think. I mean, and that was probably 4 years into our marriage.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Yeah, we I think that was like 10 years of our marriage in 1 year.
So it took a pandemic to make your marriage normal for a period of time, is what you're saying. That's amazing. I just have to mention, you two did a really beautiful performance of Salut demeure, the tenor aria from Faust. I can't remember what it was for, but I remember you playing the violin solo for that, and you singing, and I guess you were at your home at that time. It was really touching.
Thank you.
So that's great that you have or that you're open enough to be able to share, supportive words or constructive criticism, and that's a lot of vulnerability. I remember in an interview, I think it was, or perhaps in the book about Jussi Björling's life, Annalisa Björling said that she would never give Jussi, the famous tenor, criticism the night of a show. It was always the next day. And it takes a lot to hear from a loved one, hey, this could have been a little bit different. So Bobby and Kristen, to you, since you collaborate so closely together, what is that support system like for you? Where are the challenges, and what have you found that's beautiful in it that people might not know about?
Our situation is the complete opposite to Yoon and Stephen, in that we spend every moment of every day together, and we do everything together.
Unless we're on Zoom like this.
Unless we're on Zoom, we're in separate rooms. Like, in fact, this is chosen because we are together so much that we decided we needed space on Zoom. We needed to not be scrunching into the same one camera. And, this was a decision that we made very consciously. In about 2011. We had two very small children, and he had projects and I had projects. And it was after going through a year where we had projects competing with each other, not only for time, but for awards. And it was a very weird year where we were in sharing categories and up against each other.
Wow. Amazing.
And it was sort of a very conscious moment for us to say, I think for the good of our children, we had like a 5 and a 1-year-old at that point, we need to really align. And we had already sort of found that we loved working together anyway, and we made each other stronger in different ways. And we kind of said, all right, let's really do this and kind of unify so that we're only dealing with one schedule and juggling the demands of everything around one schedule. That didn't mean that was easy, because it still involved going to LA for, several times a year for at least 3-day junkets while we're working on animation. And what do we do with our 2 children in Brooklyn? We figured it out, and it made it much easier that there was only one career schedule we were juggling.
It effectively turns us into a single parent.
Yeah.
We have the same problems that, single moms have.
Yeah.
Because there's never a need for one of us to be away.
Wow. That's such a big choice. I mean, have there been other couples that you're aware of in your space that have made that kind of conscious choice. It was it seems like kind of a brave decision to make, to say we're going to be arm in arm in this career, for the good of ourselves, our career, our children. I mean, I'm hard pressed to think about that motivation and another couple. Did you have a model you were following, or is it just something where you said, this is what we have to do?
The funny thing was, I think there's another narrative you can say, as opposed to just it being a practical choice. And that was, I was my career was forward. I was the first to get to Broadway and have a career. And Kristen's career, not that it was not going well, it was going great, but she was definitely seen as kind of like, in our partnership, she was practically the junior partner. And when we started writing Frozen, which is a show about two women discovering their power, claiming their power, I got to watch Kristen and our other collaborator, Jen Lee, go through the same process of finding their power, their power as women, supporting one another in a process of women making a story about women, in which the Disney princess became the subjective hero of the story. And it was an eye-opening thing in our marriage, honestly, because I always thought of myself as, well, I'm kind of the breadwinner. Kristen's doing great. I'm supporting Kristen. We're doing this together. But through that process, watching Kristen come into her own artistically, gaining confidence, making choices, calling shots, and finding all of this energy, it was a boost, honestly, to our marriage, and it was great to make our collaboration more equal and our partnership more strong. And that's why we really have only worked together since, because it's been such an exciting process of seeing each other.
That's so beautiful.
If I can just add, I'm very lucky to have a partner who gave me the space to do that. I think other marriages might have imploded in that growth period for me. And what's also interesting, just very quickly, is that when you look at the projects we've done together, we're very lucky that we only choose the things that really speak to our gut in a big way. And one of the first things we did was Finding Nemo the Musical, which is in Disney World. It plays like 11 times a day or something.
Right.
And that was about that. We wrote that just as we were having a child, and it was about like protecting a child and letting it out in the world. Frozen was when we had two little girls, an older one and a younger one.
Right.
Frozen 2 was about growth and sort of letting them go into the world and figure out their purpose. Coco is sort of about how do you stay in touch and keep your family close even when they're on the other side. We were losing Bobby's mom. Like so much of what we infuse our projects with is actually what we are going through in our own relationship, in our own lives, in our own families. So I don't know if the whole next process is going to be all about hot flashes.
You're definitely going to be taking lead on that one, Kristen. Yeah, exactly.
That's more like Goddardammerung.
Oh my gosh! Well, we're gonna get to opera again in just a second. That's so beautiful, and thank you for being so vulnerable with that, Bobby and Kristen, because even just being able to talk so openly about what that dynamic was like before you became this unbelievable power couple. That's really tender stuff, and the truth is we're all dealing with these kinds of complex dynamics in our relationships, whether we're in the arts or not. And I just really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. So let's go back to Götterdämmerung for a second. We're not going to get into a deep probe of Wagner or the Ring Cycle per se, but we were talking before the recording started about, or maybe even earlier in the show, we were talking about opera, and I want to dive into this question while I have all four of you here about opera and musical theater, because we're in this period of time where these big challenges to the performing arts, whether it's in commercial theater or in the nonprofit space. And I think it's a period of time where innovation and exploration and boldness are really going to be the things that ultimately win the day, even if we're really in this particular moment just trying to figure out how to sort of make it through a tough period of time in live theater in particular. And one of the things that I see as an opportunity is a connection between opera and theater and musical theater. You mentioned Janine Tesori a little while ago, who has reached across both of these spaces very successfully. But starting with Bobby and Kristen, what is the difference, if any, between opera and musical theater? Because I think the blurrier that line is, the more exciting the opportunities are. Is there a difference at all from your perspective?
I fell in love with opera at Williams College, and I did take a wonderful class called Verdi versus Wagner. And
oh, yeah.
At the same time, I was obsessed with musical theater and listening to Sondheim all the time, and thought I was a Vita. I think one of the biggest differences is that opera can take the time to really slow down time and steep itself in just the emotion and musicality and excellence in music for a second without driving the story forward. It has a certain flexibility around music versus story, I think. In general, musical theater has to be very, very careful. It's more the promise between the audience and the creators is that the story will keep moving forward. Now there are the exceptions to these moments. Wonderful 11th hour, 11th. What's the word?
11 o'clock number.
Thank you. 11 o'clock numbers.
Right.
Big moments where time stops and you get Maria and Tony dancing and snapping with each other. But very often the story wins all, and there's a timer on how long you can steep yourself in musicality.
Interesting.
I think that's the biggest difference to me.
I think you're right. I think that a lot of it has to do with these unspoken contracts or promises between performers and audience. And then there's the unspoken traditions around which it's created. I think, like, for example, I know in opera, you come to rehearsal knowing the material, right? Whereas in musical theater, all of that is taught. And there's a lot of weird little differences in the making of department.
Yeah, from a cultural perspective,
I think it's one of those things that breaks down the closer you look. There's, you can watch an operatic production of a Sondheim show and the same show on Broadway. I'm thinking of Sweeney Todd right now.
Right.
And there's very little difference. I think obviously there's the two are related. They're pretty close cousins.
Yeah. Right.
One of the things that I think makes it close cousins are the use of motifs. I think that Wagner and his motivic work is all over some of the best musicals. That you create a motif for a character and that evolves throughout the show, giving it a unified musicality. Even if you're using them far more, I want to say, efficiently or maybe more starkly in musical theater than you get to use them in opera.
Interesting. Just going back to, I agree with you about the power of motives in music and that the best musicals and the best operas, you feel like you know the characters emotionally on a certain level because those motives have been so well employed through an entire show. One of the conversations that's happening in the opera space now, to your point, Kristen, about not being able to languish in or you said steep. I love that metaphor. to steep in the music. There's this discussion about, should more operas be like 90 minutes? And then you're talking about cuts that would create a propulsion that feels probably more like what you're thinking about with musical theater. And because there's this, perhaps there's a little bit of a grass is greener perspective that, this dynamic of the book leading the score leading the book, we're looking over at the fence and saying, oh, wouldn't it be great, for Elsa to have a 13-minute aria on Cabaletta or something like that. Where on the opera side, we're saying, oh, for new audiences, they might not be ready for the immolation scene and the ring cycle, and they might need something that's tauter and more propelled in order to feel like they can relate emotionally to the work. Stephen and Yoon, what do you think about what you just heard? Do you see it sort of the same way? Do you see these as the same forms, or what's their relationship to you?
Well, I see a lot of similarities between opera and musical theater because, opera is mostly European based and musical theater is very American based. It started mostly here, with, I think Gershwin pieces are very operatic. What is the other one? What is it?
Four Gambas?
No, Rodgers and Hammerstein. They're very, back in the day, they were done by operatic voices, There's a lot of things like in opera, like Carmen and Manon that have a lot of singing ensembles and they have dialogue. So there's a lot of similarities between it. I think for some reason, somewhere along the line, we separated the two. And I think, an opera house can do musical theater. And I think, the West End and Broadway can do opera. They did it with Baz Luhrmann's La Boheme. Difficult because you needed 3 casts, and because the music is very taxing on the voice, and to do it 8 shows a week, it's difficult. But it's also difficult on musical theater performers to do 8 shows a week.
Right.
I personally, I started in musical theater. That's what I was comfortable with. I wasn't comfortable as an American musician with languages. I come from a family that speaks one language. We're a one-language family. We're not bilingual. Right. So to do something in Italian was frightening, and German was frightening. Same thing with French. So musical theater gave me that opportunity to be able to create a song with my voice using a language that I knew. And it also got me into acting and got me into the drama and finding a character arc. And so I think we can learn a lot from both forms, both styles. And I think, as you said before about when you come to rehearsal, you already know the music, but that's not entirely true. I did a long time ago, I did a new piece called Moby Dick. It was new at the time. And yes, there was a form, there was a structure, there was a score that was written. But once we got there, a lot of the arias changed, the music changed. We had to relearn things because once you hear it in person in the ensemble setting, some things worked, some things didn't work. And the composer and the librettist were opening to changes to make the piece stronger. I think the only reason opera is like that is because more people are afraid to take a chance on a new piece. Because for some reason, in opera, the opera fans are very stuck in the past, very stuck on what was already out there, what's already written, what's already performed. And maybe it's because of people like me that, they're comfortable with things they know. If they're not bilingual, it's hard for them to look into something else. They've learned the opera, they've learned everything about it, and that's what they know. But I think the only way opera is going to survive is if it evolves. It has to. I mean, look at musical theater. It's evolved so much over the years. And you still go back to the things like Sweeney Todd is back. But then you have room for new things, new styles, new genres of music in Broadway. I think we need to do the same thing with opera. Right. Just because the audience has changed, the audience has evolved. You don't want to say people that love the old style are either there or not there, or they've passed it on to their kids, and some haven't. So we need to evolve to keep the art form alive.
Yeah, that's a huge point. That in the world of theater, the question is always what's coming next? What are the new shows that are coming out? And then Bobby and Kristen, you were talking about awards. This idea that we're constantly having an expectation in the theater space of new works that are going to sort of wow us. It's not that that's not happening in opera. In fact, there's probably more vital time in terms of the creation of new opera now than ever before. but we don't center it as the primary expectation. It's true that traditional work still has an incredible pull of gravity. Yoon, do you see it the same way? Opera and musical theater are very close worlds. Anything out of this that you wanted to pull out?
I just wanted to add something as an instrumentalist and someone who I'm not that familiar with musical theater. I mean, he drags me to musicals and I enjoy them, but I didn't grow up with it, and it's not just could you just grab it?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
We have a very
needy dog. But I just wonder, as an instrumentalist and as someone in the orchestra, am I right that most musicals, the orchestra has a click track? Is that correct? Am I right in assuming that, or is that
not? Some of the numbers need a click because it needs to be timed. Things need to be timed to other to recordings that get played during the, but not every song. That's not the norm.
I was just wondering if maybe the only difference that I could see as kind of an outsider is that musical theater is very much focused on, like you said, the storytelling and the acting and the singers. And perhaps some of the greatest operas are just as great, even if the singers weren't there, or the preludes, or the actual music. And I could be wrong. There could be some Broadway musicals that have that focus on that, but that's my little 1 cent as a violinist.
It's good.
Well,
it's
some
good
of
discussion.
the older ones, when you think about Leonard Bernstein, you brought up Gershwin, you brought up Rodgers and Hammerstein, that they were all listening to a lot of opera. They were all raised going to more opera.
Bernstein was also the conductor of New York Philharmonic for years. Probably the best conductors in New York Philharmonic. Yeah.
Exactly. So he was very steeped in both worlds. And what's interesting is you also have to look at the breeding grounds for where the creators are coming from. And the musical theater writers are coming from all over the place, but they're coming from workshops, like they're coming from NYU, they're coming from the BMI workshop, they're coming from college, they're coming from loving hip hop and pop music and a different kind of storytelling. And then those people who are coming to be career opera creators are often coming out of conservatories, coming out of places. So that is also going to completely affect who is telling the story and how they are going to tell the story.
Perhaps I guess the best of both worlds would be if we could all learn from each other and take the good in everything, and maybe it will be more of a one art form one day.
That's just right. And I think that sort of gets to the core of this whole episode, which is how two parts can make something greater than their sum, whether it's in a relationship or whether it's the pairing of opera and musical theater. And I think that's a beautiful message.
Bringing it home, Joe. Bringing it home.
Bringing it home. You're feeling it.
That period of time, Joe, when we met in the late 90s, was a prime moment of musical theater and opera crossover. There were some wonderful albums that came out around then. Do you know the Dawn Upshaw I Wish It So album?
Oh yeah, we have that album. Absolutely. Yep.
And obviously Audra McDonald. There's just some, it was a cultural fad at the time,
and I miss it. The three tenors. My parents always being like, put on the three tenors.
That had just come out the summer, or immediately before my first summer as a student at Tanglewood, the Boston University Tanglewood Institute. Everyone was playing the three tenors all the time, and that was a watershed moment for our field. That was a moment which we haven't really repeated since then, where our art form burst through sort of the public imagination in the way that some of the work that you've done, Bobby and Kristen, has done. And I think we all need those moments of inspiration that just kind of explode our perception of how people relate and connect with these art forms and see themselves in the art forms. So
I think that's the most important, because if there isn't a connection between what's being performed and the audience that comes and sees it, they don't exist anymore.
That's it. Okay, so we're going to just do a quick speed round real fast before we tie off. Stephen and Yoon, if you had to perform in one musical theater piece, real or imagined, today, what would the piece be?
Oh, Les Mis, hands
Les
down.
Mis. Okay, Yoon?
It's just like, what
We come back
is
to
a
you.
musical theater?
But I actually would want to think, I don't know the title or anything of it. It's the da, 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 da.
That's
That's
Les
Les
Mis.
Mis.
Les
That's Les
Mis, all right. We'll work it out.
Couldn't even hear it. I can't say
Bobby and
Beautifully
Kristen,
sung.
if you had to compose an opera tomorrow, what would the subject matter be? Real fast, first instinct. Don't think about
Well,
it.
would it be in Italian or German?
It could be. It could be in Lopezese.
I think we did say German. Kristen, what would it be? Oh my
I don't. I
gosh.
think it'd be fun to do a James Bond opera.
Ooh, nice. James Bond.
I think
It's expensive.
it'd be very expensive, but couldn't you imagine like the
Yes.
villains would get these amazing arias and
Oh, I like
and
it.
if you could pay
We'll
for
get Julie
those
Taymor.
set pieces.
Absolutely, Julie Taymor would be available for that, I'm sure.
Maybe the James Bond could be female, like
Yeah,
a female
okay.
James Bond
There we go.
opera.
Okay. Yes. I like this. I think I like what I like about the James Bond answer, and both of these stories, Les Mis and James Bond, they're kind of epic in scale, and I think that that's something that, you know, if I'm gonna, I really feel like opera musical theater are on a continuum more than delineated in any sort of way. But if I was to say, here's a thing that makes opera different, is this kind of elevating of the storyline when there's kind of something just kind of epic. And I feel like sometimes the momentous nature of the music kind of helps achieve that elevated level. But good discussion today, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us on this episode of UnMic'd. Bobby, it's great to reconnect with you. Kristen, great to meet you. And Stephen and you, great to see you guys again. Thank you so much for being here today. And we look forward to welcoming everyone back for another episode of UnMic'd.